I'm sitting down with Ashes. They've got a lot of cool stuff upcoming, particularly a new release that they just dropped. Do you guys drop it today?
No, it's coming out. It doesn't have a release date yet, but it's coming out
Okay, so
sometime in
just
hopefully late
TBD.
November.
Okay, cool. So we'll touch a little bit more on the end, but you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'm Braden Reddell. I'm 22 years old, and I, work the studio and try to be kind of our, band social media executive
Cool.
guy.
I'm Brett. I'm his brother. I'm 25 years old. Along with him in 2016, started the band. I was the first guy who kind of had the guitars, and then kind of bought him a guitar when he was 15, and then kind of went from there.
Cool, cool. All right. Awesome. Well, so I wanted to talk a little bit first about Surf Carnival 2, which I've listened to down and I really like. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like recording that and like what your inspiration for that particular project came from.
Well, the recording of Surf Carnival 2 was kind of just, standard. We got in our kind of studio that we have, our makeshift studio at home, and we just started recording songs just like we always do. We kind of have it down to a science these days of like where to put the microphones and
Mm-hmm.
how to make it sound the best and everything. But the whole concept for it was that we wanted to keep going with our material of surf music and try to do a little bit more covers, because on Surf Carnival 1 it's all original material, but we wanted to on that one to do a little bit more like classic 60s stuff that people had written.
Okay. I wanted to talk to you too about what it's like making surf rock, especially in 2020, because it's not something that you see a whole lot of, which is disappointing because it's a really cool niche little part of it's a niche little subgenre of rock and roll that I think is like discounted. So I just wanted to ask a little bit about what your experience overall with making surf rock has been.
Yeah. Well, whenever we started the band, a lot of the albums that you kind of get into, I mean, before we even started the band, we got records on, I think it was my 15th birthday or 16th birthday. I got a Grateful Dead record and a Jimi Hendrix record, along with
Absolutely.
a record player that my mom got me. And then I remember going to record stores. Some of the more affordable ones that you can get are in the dollar section. And I got a Ventures record or a couple of Ventures
Cool.
albums. And that's a band who plays in that style of all instrumental and a lot of reverb on the Fender guitars. And it just really hit hard that like maybe we could eventually do that style. And so that kind of led to an inspiration to kind of revamp that. And it's a good way to learn songs, because those guys were a little bit older when they had an interest in guitars and they met each other, and then they started a band similar to like what we were doing. And then so we kind of took the same ideas and just kind of deconstructed what they were doing. And it's just a kind of a fun style, I think.
I agree. I was listening to a lot of surf rock in preparation for this interview just to kind of get myself in the headspace. And I think it's like, we have a lot of like heavy metal and like hard rock music now that, stuff like surf rock doesn't seem like it's super heavy or super rock and roll to people. But if you put yourself in the headspace of like when this stuff was coming out in like 1958, 1959, people were like, whoa, I never heard anything like this before, So
For
when
sure.
you get stuff like the Ventures or Dick Dale, it seems like, oh, this is grandpa music or whatever. But then it's like, imagine being a 17-year-old kid in the 50s and you're like, what is this?
Yeah, of course.
So I thought that was really cool. I think you guys have a lot of, even in your originals, you have a lot of that same energy of kind of putting into doing a new thing while still paying homage to like the guys that were doing it in the late 50s, early 60s. So I thought that was really cool. What, in your opinion, is the best thing about making surf rock music?
Well, the thing that interested us about it in the beginning, like when what Brett was talking about when we first started getting interested in vinyl records and everything, was it wasn't as complex as a lot of music you hear today. Of course, music on the radio is so overproduced and things like that. But there was something about the early surf rock and kind of late 50s rock that was very down to its roots. The guitars didn't have to be super
Sure.
affected. They didn't have to have all kinds of fuzz boxes and pedals. And I think there's something about that that's really attractive to a young musician who doesn't have access to a
Sure.
whole lot of crazy pedals and is going on a budget and everything. So to us, making surf rock was just sort of the only way to do it, really. Not necessarily surf rock, but just making rock and roll in the
Right.
style of surf rock and things.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is that in a lot of those genres that cross over, like garage rock and surf rock, I think it's so accessible. Whereas, a lot of digital music now, a lot of like hip hop and R&B, you have to have this whole home studio with like all kinds of microphones with pop filters, and like you have to have Pro Tools. But if you're making rock in your garage, there's an aspect of just organic, it's a very organic and genuine type of music to make, because it's just you, just the guitar, just you and the drum kit. So it's very much just you guys. So that's something that drew me to you guys particularly, and why I wanted to sit down with you, because I thought that was really cool. And not everybody is making that type of music right now. It's
Right.
it's kind of we're kind of at a vacuum for things that are like very much the artist. So I thought that was cool that you guys were doing that. I mean, not to say that there's not good music out there. There's a lot of good music out there that's very well done, but it's just removed from the player. So I thought it was cool that you guys were like really in the core of that. So you guys are working on like a kind of behind the music type DIY documentary, right?
Yeah, we've just been like filming clips of each other, kind of like how this is going right now,
Yeah.
but like we'll be in more of like a live setting, and we'll just kind of film like what's going on, and maybe a question of a band history or an influence, or maybe just what's going on at that moment. And it's probably just going to be like a 5-minute home, rockumentary sort of a thing.
Right.
So it'll be kind of cool. No big deal on that. We don't know really when it's going to be done. I kind of forgot we were even doing that. So, but yeah, that's what makes it kind of cool, is like pretty much everything that we do has to be like just completely real. Like otherwise, it's not going
Sure.
to happen the way that it needs to. And more on the last thing I want to touch on, that thing you were talking about, is we started this whole thing recording on cassette tapes in our garage, and literally that is kind of the roots of the rock and roll thing. But yeah, just to answer your question there.
That's cool. So what you guys talked about having a pretty stripped down I guess repertoire. What gear do you guys use? I've only seen you play once, so I don't remember, and this was back in March, so I don't remember what all you guys had, but what is your like go-to gear when you're recording or when you're playing live, that maybe you don't use it every time, but what do you guys like to use?
Well, it depends on which setting we're playing for. If we're doing live music, we before coronavirus, we had kind of the setup of just a guitar amp, and I would usually mic it with a bass kind of amplifier type thing, as well as a PA system that just kind of boosted the guitar audio, so that I didn't have to completely max out my master volume, because that can be kind of harmful to the amp sometimes. So that, and then I would have a PA that I would use a reverb pedal for my vocals with.
Cool.
So that we use that for pretty much every gig, but during coronavirus, we've kind of been, updating our sound a little bit and things. And for our next gigs, whenever we can get some, we'll probably be, experimenting with a few new instruments and things like that. As for the studio, our setup is kind of just, I have three microphones on Brett's drum. I have an overhead mic, a snare, and a bass drum mic. And as for the guitar, we usually always mic our Fender guitar amp, whereas most bands would go indirect into the computer just so that there's no, microphone hiss or anything. We just kind of like the more, we're like kind of a garage band, so we kind of like that sound of it. So, we kind of have that down to a science, really.
That's what I was gonna say, is listening to your stuff. It put me in a good mood, because like I live for live music, even if it's like in somebody's basement, so like listening to your stuff, I felt like I was sitting in your garage and you guys were just jamming out, and I was like, God, like I miss this, which I think is something that everybody's missing during quarantine and like coronavirus and everything being crazy right now. So I think that sound of just being like stripped down and that kind of house band kind of sound is really, really
Well, we have to. We're only two people, so when we record with a guitar and then my drums, and then we go either bass guitar on top or a second rhythm if it doesn't need a bass, but most of the time we do a bass guitar, and then overdub the vocals, or sometimes we'll sing at the same time that we're recording. So that's why it has that feel and sound to it. It is a live track.
Right, and that's what I was gonna say, and I think it's very reminiscent of like how they used to do it in the 60s, where they'd be like, all right, everybody shut up, like cram everybody into this and like we're just gonna cut it one time, and I think that it has like a very reminiscent sound of not just like those old surf rock bands, but like old Beatles tapes, and like old like the animals and like the zombies and that kind of stuff. So I thought that was really cool. And like I said, I think a lot of people now focus on like, we're so detail oriented as a society and as a group of people that we want everything to sound like it's on the radio. And when you hear something that takes you out of that and you're like, wait, hang on, this still is killing it, I think that's so cool and so important to make that type of music. So you mentioned the Ventures as one of the bands that kind of got you into the scene. What are some of your other big influences within surf rock, and then bands you were influenced by that were not necessarily in the genre? Maybe they were pop bands or rock bands or punk or whatever.
I have a couple of records that I was gonna show this one. I don't know if the camera can see this. This is the Ventures in Space.
One of the first ones we got.
So yeah, this is on the psychedelic forefront of surf territory.
Absolutely.
And if you listen to the guitars on that, I mean, they're just piercing. And then early influence, we have Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Their first album has a lot of that reverb guitar, and it's still I wouldn't say surf rock in any way. It's definitely more of a different feel. Sure. Maybe like a live club, like a really trying to have an experience.
Yeah.
But I like that too, and that was a definite influence. And then we have some Grateful Dead, some acoustic music on this album. So those are just kind of a rounded branch of like everything that we go off of that. Of course, Yes, Gentle Giant, the Moody Blues. The Moody Blues was huge for us whenever we first heard that and got a record of that and decided to make that kind of layered music.
That's what made us kind of want to make albums.
That's another one that's cheap.
Yeah,
that you can find.
So did you guys grow up listening to that kind of music? Was that a part of your environment when you were kids, or was it something that once you got a little bit older, you kind of started seeking out different types of music?
No, we grew up listening to Green Day and the Black Eyed Peas, just like everybody else. But
right.
it was like
that, because that's literally what everybody was listening to.
Yeah.
But like eventually, when it was, Brett is a skateboarder, so he kind of fell into that scene of the skaters and all that, and
the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater video game series. Like they had the Doors and hip hop music, like that stuff. I was jamming that, like I was playing that, and it was so prolific, like everything about it. And that's kind of like I'm into hip hop music too as well, and other kind of stuff, like, and jazz, like, and I think influences like a culture like that kind of branches into music and then brings it
Absolutely.
into a new generation and stuff. So that was a way I heard it.
That's
And no, like we came into it like around teenage years, I would say.
I was gonna say that's so funny that you mentioned that because I've had multiple musicians mention to me that that soundtrack from that game was like inspirational to them, and it was
Yeah,
really like bizarrely very good. Um,
right.
compared
Yeah.
to like some of the other just very C-list like ah well we're not gonna pay for royalties on that. But those
Yeah, they must have paid some money for sure.
yeah, because there's some really like underground ones too where you're like, hang on, I didn't know anybody else on the planet knew about this band that are just on there. Um,
Yeah.
that's great. Okay, so part of what you really wanted to talk about, and part of what I wanted to hear about is what you're working on right now, which is a cover of Clocks, right?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's a little bit outside of the realm of surf rock.
Yeah.
I wanted to see like what made you want to cover that one specifically, and what's been your experience with recording it and putting together how we're gonna do it the Ashes way.
Well, I mean, it was a song that I had on my iPod when I was like 14. It wasn't even my iPod. It was actually a girl that I guess you want to call it dating, but I had a girlfriend when I was in like middle school, and I gave her my jacket, she gave me her iPod, and it had Coldplay on it. And even at that time I wasn't into Coldplay or anything, but I remember it had that album and it had the song Yellow and a couple other Coldplay songs. So that song is always like kind of stuck with me as like a song that's like cool. But
Right.
then, like recently, me and my brother both work at a grocery store, Central Market in Fort Worth, and they have this version that's like has like a horn, and it's like a more of a Latin
The mariachi
version.
band version of
Yeah, it's kind of
Clocks.
Okay.
weird. We don't like it as much as the original, but it came on, and I think both of us were like, "Hey, maybe we should try to do this," because he's been playing a lot of piano and
Yeah.
stuff. So I think that's kind of how it came about. And then we didn't realize how hard it. Oh, and we also watched a video of them playing it live because our dad pulled it up. He wanted to show us it, and that was like, wow, like these guys are rock
They're so
stars.
good.
Like they're
The
cool.
showmanship is like really up there, even if you're not into cold.
Yeah.
They know how to
I know.
do a
You
really
wouldn't think that we maybe would be into it. I like it.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say is I think like some people pigeonhole themselves into a certain genre or like set of genres, and I think that that can be counterintuitive to the creative process. So when you see people moving out of what they typically play and covering a pop song, which Clocks isn't necessarily like a traditional pop song, but like it's a pop song.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like I think it's really neat to see that because you can end up with some really fantastic versions of music that you wouldn't otherwise have. Which brings me to my next question, and we only have time for a couple more because I think Zoom will cut us off at 30 minutes.
Okay.
But
Okay.
so what are some of your favorite covers just in general? And then are there any covers that you think are better than the original? Which is like, I know that's a tough question. That's like blasphemy in the music world, but I have some of my favorites that I think are like
Yeah.
really close to being better than the original. So I
Well,
wanna-
you could say a couple and I'll
Um,
say a couple.
well, I mean, when you're talking about covers, like obviously, like we love the '60s music and stuff, and so like the Beatles, like you kind of think of the Beatles as Lennon and McCartney, but
right.
if you listen to the early Beatles, like they have all their foundation on late '50s rock and kind of weird soul music that they interpreted into their rock and roll ways, and all of the bands, like the Moody Blues and the Beach Boys and all the bands that were inspired by, you'll find did tons of covers, not only when they were starting out, but all through their career, and I think that doing, covers, not like totally basing your whole sound off of it, but doing a few here and there it really helps get an idea of, other musicians' input on what you're doing and just to kind of test yourself and see if you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think my favorite covers, or I'll just name two. Like, I'm pretty sure the Animals' "House of the Rising Sun" is a cover song
Yeah,
of I think it's Leadbelly who wrote that song.
yeah.
Is it Leadbelly?
It's like an old blues
And
version.
yeah, but there's another one by the Frigid Pink, and I think they did it even better than the Animals, but not necessarily better. It's just you could put those two side by side, and man, those are two smoking ones.
Right.
But the last one that is my favorite cover probably currently is a song called "If I Were a Carpenter."
Okay.
And I don't know who wrote the original song, but there's a band that's called Chicken Shack from the '70s,
Okay.
and they did a version of "If I Were a Carpenter," which is like a folk song, like written to a woman, about like a working class man. But they did a smoking hard rock cover of it. So
Awesome.
there's merit to doing different versions of
That's what
of
I was
songs.
gonna say. Is I think even if it's a song that's been covered 100 times, um, if you can find, I think doing covers helps you kind of discover what your personal sound is. Like, let's take this song and make it ours. And then I think that helps with your own creative process and coming up with originals. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's absolutely. I think there's a ton of merit to doing covers. Have you guys heard the Gary Clark Jr. cover of "Come Together" by the Beatles?
No, I've seen him play live on YouTube though,
Yeah,
and I do know that he's a smoking guitar player, but I haven't seen that.
it is one I would highly recommend. It's like very close to being better than the original, which is like,
That's cool.
Wow.
yeah, and I'm like, I'm the I'm the Beatles fan, and it's coming
Yeah.
to me like I love the Beatles, but that version is
Well,
like
I mean, they're supposed to hit you, when they're playing, they're supposed to drive the energy. So whoever's doing that is doing it right, it doesn't matter who it is.
absolutely. Well, is there anything else that you guys want to touch on before we kind of start wrapping it up and plugging social medias and etc.? Anything you guys wanted to talk about?
The
Um,
new EP.
well, I mean, isn't that what we're gonna wrap up with? I mean, maybe just like we started this in our garage, and we started banging on Home Depot buckets and with an acoustic guitar, and literally like there would be times where like I would watch rock videos or listen to records, and I never thought I could ever do it, and never thought I could ever even be anything, a part of music. And to do it after a couple of years and to have shows like we've played at Six Flags, we've played at bars, we've done stuff that we never thought that we could, and it's all through the hard work of just continuous times and nights and a lot of frustration, a lot of having to go through that brick wall of self-belief and doubt, and sometimes even like thinking you don't belong in something, but it's making it happen. So I mean, hopefully we are just hoping that that's received in a fun way, because we're not like the craziest like hard working band, we're not going to say that, but like we have a lot of fun with what we do, and we're going to
Sure.
continue doing it. So we just hope that that's received on a level that is fun to listen to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so genuine, and I think another thing it shares in common with the way people used to make music in the 50s and 60s is now a lot of bands like you guys, and including you guys, um they'll drop a few little EPs or like just a single every now and then, and that's very akin to how people used to do it. They drop 4 or 5 songs here, 2 or 3 songs here, then you get an album. And so I think it is, streaming obviously has changed a lot of things about music and how people buy music and how people own music, but it has also, I think, made it pretty accessible for, if you've got a microphone and you can record your stuff, you can get it up on SoundCloud or Spotify or wherever. And then you can have people like listening to you. And so to
Yeah.
see you guys that are making music in your garage and putting it out on Spotify, I think it's super, super cool. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I think it's tight. So let's wrap up talking a little bit more about the new EP, and then I think that'll about put us at time.
Okay. The EP is kind of a concept EP in a way, kind of a loose concept of just, it's all covers. So it's 5 songs, and I'll try to list them all. It's Tame Impala's Lucidity.
Sweet.
It's 2 Beatles songs, No Reply and Norwegian Wood.
Sweet.
We have obviously Clocks by Coldplay. And then our last one is Do You Believe in Magic by The Lovin' Spoonful.
Sweet.
So yeah, so we just kind of tried to take all these songs and just do our own versions. And to be completely honest with you, we completely produced them like we've never produced any other songs. Like we're talking like when we recorded a vocal track, we did it 3 more times, and then we put all of those on top of one another to get like a different harmony. So each vocal on this EP has like 3 or 4 tracks for it, and the guitars, we tried to layer a lot more rhythm on it and percussion and all things like that, and while still really trying to pay homage to the original artists, and not disrespecting them or anything, because in the end we're trying to recreate the music because we love it, and we're trying to get it out there to more people.
That's awesome.
Totally.
On that.
No, it's called Earth Songs, and we've recorded the basics of everything. We have to mix it and just do a little bit of post-production, and we already have a cover. We did an artist on the internet. We got to make a really cool, beautiful thing for it. So it'll be out within probably a month, probably shorter than that. So be looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm excited for that. Rubber Soul is my favorite Beatles album, so we'll see one off of that. Well, that's awesome, you guys. Thank you for lending me your time. Do you guys want to plug your social medias and anything else that you'd like the public to know about?
It's Ashes Fort Worth, all one word.
That's for Instagram.
For Instagram. Our YouTube channel is sometimes hard to find. You can find it by typing in our because it's just one word, Ashes, but you can find it by typing in our music videos for like Perpendicular Dreams or Unknown. Other than that, we don't really
we have a website. We have ashesband.com, and we try to update that, and it's kind of cool to look at because you could look at the whole history of the band and everything, but we mainly do it on Instagram and stuff like that. So that's probably the best way to keep up with us.
All right. Well, I will definitely be anticipating that new EP. That's very exciting. And hopefully everybody will go and check you guys out. So thank you so much for your time.
Sure, no problem.
Hey, right on. Thank you so much for doing this.
All right.